Hi again, another data binding video. This time I want to talk about two things. So the first thing is color binding. So previously we've had things like title binding, and that's just using text. It's just a simple value. With the color binding, I've made a slightly more generic script. This one has the ability to allow you to say what kind of component you want to change. So in this one, it's using a bounded text label control. So the implication here is that it is a text control. It understands it's going to be using text, and then you just say, I want the name of it. In this color binding one, I'm not making that assumption. I'm allowing you as a designer to choose what component you're going to change. So you just say, I want an image control and I want to change its color property. So that's means I can have a lot more control over a lot more different sorts of types and components. So that's good and useful. We'll see whether that works. So each of these scenes here, when we're running, we can see that this space shooter scene is set to a kind of purple color, whereas this audio only is set to this sort of bluey grey color. So the binding appears to be working there. That's good. And you can see here in the output that we've got this one-way binding, and we're setting it to whatever that RGB value means. So that all looks to work. That's good. Now the image editing is a little bit more interesting. So what we were seeing with the title and the color is a sort of one-to-one binding with a data item in a collection. What image editing binding needs to do is it needs to be a many-to-one relationship. So on the actual app itself, there is a view model, and that view model has a property called isEditing. So when I click this pencil, the isEditing is set to true. So what I want is for each of these items to respond to that single property change. And I do that using a many-to-one relationship called a parent binding. So if we look at these titles, these are just binding, and this one's parent binding. And you can see here that the property is isEditing scene, which is exactly the same property as this button uses. So they're sharing a single data point. So what does parent binding look like? If I come here, let's just bump this up a bit, you can see that parent binding is literally just a different name. It has all the same behavior and implementation as binding does. It's really just saying that, okay, I'm slightly different behavior from whomever's using me. And this is important because in my dynamic binding manager, when I come in here and I'm enumerating over all the different bindings, I can then make a decision saying, well, is this binding a parent binding? If it is, then assign it the view model as its data source. If it isn't, it's just going to use the current data item, which is the standard looping item in the collection. So this enables me to do this many-to-one relationship. So does it work? Let's click the button. And you can see that all of them at once have responded to that one change. You should be able to see that in the results. isEditing scene equals true. And then that data change is now being reflected in every individual item. So as you can see, that the framework is now expanding. We've now got a lot more sort of generic controllability with this bound type control. And now we have the ability to look at data in the view model or the parent binding with this script. So we're getting nearer to the end. I really hope it finishes soon. Okay, thanks for listening.